Today's video is all about painting with transparent paints. And hopefully you'll learn how to do glazing, painting with speed paints and washes. And we're going to use a really quick watercolor painting that I did for this video. So hopefully after watching this video, you'll be more confident, or at the very least you know what you're doing when you're painting with transparent paints. And your journey of becoming a glazing master will start after watching this video. Now, since we're using my artwork, my watercolor painting, really quick painting, to explain glazing and washes and speed paints, I think since it's bigger, I could show and explain it better. And you'll see how I build up transparencies or how I build up colors using transparent paints. Any transparent paint, speed paints, washes, or even inks, they're all practically glaze paints. But practically, because technically they're not. But glazing is basically painting with transparent paints or translucent paints. You thin down your paints and paint transparent layers or translucent layers on top of each other. So you have to have a basic, pretty good knowledge of color theory and of course lighting when you're painting with transparent paints. Also, later in the video, we'll be discussing the common mistakes of new and even intermediate painters when it comes to glazing or painting with speed paints. Lastly, in this video, we'll answer the question if all transparent paints or glazes like washes and speed paints and thin down Warpaints Fanatic are all glazes, or you could do glazes with them. What is the difference between those two kinds of paints? Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to my channel. This channel is supported by all these awesome brands. Also, special thanks to The Army Painter for making this video possible. Key to proper glazing and blending is the drying time. There are two ways to address this. One is to wick your brush and load your brush with the proper amount of paint depending on the size of the brush. Or you could simply use a retarder to have a longer window to blend your paints. Glazing seems difficult if you think that your blending should be perfect. Like you should apply really thin down paints and build up multiple layers of paints to create good blending. However, the easiest way to create good blending is to paint via texturing. By glaze texturing, or I call it sometimes glaze stippling, glaze sketching. Basically, you paint with transparent paints, you thin them down a little bit if you're using regular paints, or if you're using speed paints or washes and you're good at wicking your brush, you could actually paint textures with these transparent paints, and that will create very nice blending or the illusion of very smooth blending. I think we could go deeper into glazing at the same time producing texture in a different video. Now, if you're getting value from this video, give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Another way to create good blending is to blend the edges of your speed paints and washes. However, this is not always possible because your miniature is so small. But you could do blending of the edges with cloak or sometimes big armor pieces. So for new painters who just want to finish a really quick painting of their miniature for gaming, like with speed paints and washes, blending the edges of the speed paints and washes on big areas is key. Like when you apply the speed paints or wash, you blend the edges and you'll have really good results. However, for more advanced painters who want to spend more time on their miniature and build up highlights via glazing and layering, I recommend you do glaze layering or apply fat glazes in my older videos and build up the layers via texturing. Like you stipple if it's skin, or you do cross-hatching but with semi-translucent paints so that you create very good blending. Now, if you're trying to create depth and really nice contrast to your painting, I recommend that you play around with complementary colors. Like if you painted orange, you could like layer blue so that you have deeper shadows. If you painted yellow, you could like apply violet shades so that you have really deep shades. And if you painted like green, you could actually use red for the recesses and really deep shade areas. By doing this, layering complementary colors over each other, you create like really nice depth, but it's not too dark and it will still have very nice tone, unlike using dark blackish paint or really dark browns. When you want deeper shade areas, but still you want really nice dark tones, dark shades to those areas, not completely black or not completely dark. So by playing around with complementary colors, you could see in the artwork right now, you create very nice purple shades, violet shades, dark blues, and even dark reds. So the color depth is very nice and you create contrast at the same time. Using complementary colors with your shades when it comes to miniatures is the very reason why I don't use like strong shade or very dark browns. If I painted an orc skin, I would apply analogous color like dark blue shade tones or blue tones wash or even red tones so that I create nice depth. But I almost never use dark browns except if I'm painting leather or fur or really like areas that are actually brown. Now let's talk about the common like mistakes of painting with speed paints, washes, and even glazing. The first common mistake of new painters or even intermediate painters when it comes to painting with this very runny paints is too much loading of the brush. You have to like get used to loading the brush with the proper amount of washes or speed paints. And if you overload it, simply wick it on like a piece of towel. For me, I wick it on a microfiber because it's not as absorbent as a tissue paper. Most of the time, I wick it on my finger, just my finger, or my shirt. So my normal shirts are full of paint. But it's better for me than a piece of tissue paper because sometimes tissue paper wicks the brush too much. Like it absorbs too much water, it absorbs too much paint. But to each his own. Like for me, microfiber works or even my shirt. Another common mistake when using washes and definitely with speed paints is not understanding the drying time. If you work slow, you might produce nasty coffee stains. Also, if you work faster and use a bigger brush, you'll produce better results. However, make sure that the brush again is loaded properly. Also, the drying time varies. If you load paint too much on the miniature, the drying time will be slower, but it will tint less. Like all of the paints, like this is the raised area. If you apply too much speed paints, all of those paints will be pulled down to the crevices because there's too much paint. So you have to get used to the amount of speed paints you apply on the surface of the miniature, or else it will like be pulled down towards the crevices, the deeper areas, the details of the miniature. Lastly, the most common mistake of using speed paints, washes, and glazing is over thinning your paints. If you over thin these paints, they'll be too transparent, and I doubt even if you're doing a competition piece that you need a very thin down paint. You'll need to apply 5, 6, or even 7 layers so that you really see the results. You don't need to do that. A good starting point to glazing with Warpaints Fanatic is around 3 to 4 parts stabilizer or water, if you want water, and 1 part Warpaints Fanatic. Warpaints Fanatic needs a lot of thinning so that you get really nice glazes. But if you don't have Warpaints Fanatic, usually regular acrylic paints would thin nicely at around 3 parts stabilizer or medium or water and 1 part acrylic paint. Finally, when you're painting with speed paints and washes or even very thinned down regular acrylics, I highly recommend you use synthetic paints. Because these paints, the thinned down regular acrylics, speed paints and washes, and inks, are very runny paints. By runny meaning no matter how you take care of your brush during painting, how much you rinse your brush during painting, a little bit of this runny paints will travel towards the ferrule, the metal part of the brush. And this will slowly build up and dry on the metal part of the brush and will slowly kill your brush. So I recommend using synthetic brushes because you don't want your Kolinsky being killed slowly by washes and speed paints and glazes. Now let's answer the question, if you could glaze with washes and speed paints and at the same time you could glaze with thinned down regular Warpaints Fanatic, what's the difference? Well, the washes and speed paints were formulated to create shades, to create good recesses, and basically they will make your painting darker as you apply more layers. With thinned down regular acrylics or thinned down Warpaints Fanatic, you can build up thin layers on top of each other without darkening the paint, especially if you thin lighter colors. But you could also build up the shade areas with darker purples and violets via thin down regular acrylics. Unlike with washes and speed paints will continue to darken your painting. Now, before my final thoughts, a huge thanks to all my patrons at Patreon and of course the Army Painter for making this video possible. There, I think I was able to share some basic and not so basic concepts when it comes to painting with transparencies, when it comes to painting with speed paints, washes, or even glazing. I hope this video gave you a good grasp of how to utilize the unique properties of speed paints, how to paint with transparencies, how to build up transparent colors, and also the more predictable effects of washes. It's important to note though that painting with transparencies, especially with speed paints and washes, it's less predictable than painting with solid, opaque colors. But by having this knowledge and knowing your paints as you practice, knowing your speed paints and your washes, how they look when you put them on top of each other when you layer transparent paints, will give you like a really nice feeling of being confident when you paint via this method. And for good painters who are really good at layering with more opaque paints, having the knowledge of like how to utilize these transparencies, these effects, and the properties of painting with transparent paints will make you a better miniature painter. Ultimately, key to improve as a painter, as a miniature painter, is knowing your paints. You have to know how it looks when it dries, you know how it looks when you mix certain colors, and it makes creating art or painting miniatures a little bit more predictable. Meaning, you can like achieve the results that you want easier and more comfortably and more enjoyable. A shameless plug ahead, our Kickstarter is fully funded and thank you so much for all the backers. You'll have like 3 sets of tutorials from the different tiers. Of course, airbrushing tutorial in PDF and video format, layering and glazing or sketch and glaze in PDF and video format too, and of course our double slop chop with speed paints, which is only in PDF format because we have a ton of double slop chop videos in video format here at YouTube already. Now after watching this video, do check out our Kickstarter. The link is down below. That's it, Pansit. I hope you like this video. Do like, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff. Until next video guys. Bye! Now, if you like this video, do check out these other videos.